It's strange to be here in 2023 and imagine that it's been 14 years since the release of Empire Total War. 2009 definitely seems like a lifetime ago, but what's perhaps even stranger is that this massive game, this new generation of Total War games, only really lasted one single year. One depressing year of minor patches and fixes, until 1 year later, in the year of our Lord 2010, we received Napoleon. Napoleon turned out to be everything Empire wasn't. It had a focused map with large landmasses, it was based on accomplishing historical events rather than being a massive sandbox, and lastly, it was actually polished. But in all other ways, Napoleon was little more than an Empire remastered, although in a different package, and again, only 1 year later. Now, if you've been following this channel, you know I love Napoleon Total War for everything it did, and lament the things it didn't, among them being of Empire's size and scope. But the worst offense Napoleon, and by extension Creative Assembly committed here, was to make Napoleon Total War a standalone expansion, or in other words, its very own game. And speaking of full games, Clash of Clans is a deep mobile strategy game set in a fantasy universe where building your base and gathering resources is everything. Clash of Clans allows you to see your village grow over time, becoming ever more powerful with new and better troops and weapons. And the best part? It's all happening online and in real time, meaning you actually have to fight, or clash, against other players out there. Being one of the most downloaded mobile games of all time, with 500 million downloads on iOS and Android, it's a game that keeps on being updated with new and exciting features all the time, meaning each battle feels unique and different from the last. If you want to experience exciting strategy fun on the go or at home, make sure to check out Clash of Clans right now on iOS and Android, either by scanning this awesome QR code or by following the link in the comments. Thank you so much to Supercell for sponsoring this video, and good luck and have fun in Clash of Clans. And before we go on, I sincerely hope you consider signing up and supporting me on Patreon or as a YouTube member, if you enjoy this type of content and want more of it. It's in the word, isn't it? Standalone. It stands alone, and in this case, Napoleon stood apart from Empire and had no impact on its predecessor. In gaming terms, this has a lot to say, because when Napoleon stood alone as its very own package, it did nothing to fix or update Empire Total War, one of the most ambitious Total War titles of all time. Napoleon came with noticeably updated visuals, an actual workable AI, and better performance, but none of this actually benefited Empire at all. Now, why would they do that, you may ask? These are two different games after all. And this is of course true, but it also strikes at the heart of this matter. Empire and Napoleon are made from the exact same game engine, and the only difference is literally just a year of patching and tweaking. Several games out there receive updates to visuals these days, for example ray tracing or 4K updates, and some even update a game's graphics completely, like The Witcher 3's Next Gen update, which on PC requires nothing but a simple game update. If Napoleon had been a normal expansion to Empire, as in an integral part of the game rather than an update, all of these tweaks could have also improved upon the base Empire game, instead of making Empire and Napoleon such different experiences. In my opinion, this is one of the single biggest tragedies in Total War history, and definitely ranks up there as one of the top 10 anime betrayals. What's even worse is of course that CA completely left Empire after Napoleon released, and never looked back, not even ever fully releasing the multiplayer co-op campaign, which I actually have as part of taking part in the beta over a decade ago. The moral of the story? Standalone expansions are bad as a concept, because they do nothing for the massive game they're based on. Napoleon is not the only example of this happening, and the biggest other one has to be Attila. Just like Napoleon, Attila was a fantastic evolution of its predecessor, but none of the fixes and tweaks were seen in Rome 2. It's of course a sad fact also that if Attila had been just made for Rome 2, it wouldn't have seen the performance issues it suffered. In many ways then, focusing on making new content for the same game not only puts every new expansion under one title, but it also helps to patch up the main game, which is after all what most people are here for. Empire undoubtedly sold more than Napoleon, and likewise, Rome 2 sold much better than Attila. Furthermore, what's happened recently shows just how much better a policy this would be. Napoleon Total War does currently not work on 12th or 13th gen Intel CPUs, but Empire somehow does. If they were the same game, they would both be working right now. or worst case, having just one game to focus CA's attention on, and would make it a higher priority to patch and keep up to date. This policy of standalone expansions has luckily largely evaporated after Attila. Rome 2 ironically saw a slew of expansions released after Attila came out, which also helped to keep Rome 2 patched and updated with new mechanics. Total War 3 Kingdoms saw many expansions which were all tied to one and the same game. And of course, the Warhammer games is a different beast altogether. Each game significantly expanded their respective campaign maps, and received a massive amounts of DLC for those specific maps, while Warhammer 2 and 3 kind of retroactively patched in the entirety of their predecessors. It is possible to look at Warhammer 2 and 3 as sort of standalone expansions, I suppose, but they add so much new that they actually justify being their own games. And either way, Warhammer 3 has combined all of the previous games into itself, updating performance and visuals in the process. This means that if you want to play as the Empire or the High Elves, you're never forced to go play the second game, the one with both worse performance and older visuals. Warhammer 3 provides for it all, and instead of taking the approach of piecemeal selection, Creative Assembly actually opted in to lay the groundwork for a globe-spanning campaign, which after all has its foundation in Warhammer 1 from 2016. No other Total War franchise can truly claim the same attention to detail or effort over such a long time. And it's especially a shame for those who love the older games, whose main titles like Empire and Rome 2 were left with foundations that were suboptimal. Empire never received visual updates or crucial Napoleon patches, and Rome 2 similarly never received a system of governors or fertility from Attila. The sad part in all of this is of course that, despite everything, and for some reason, Total War standalone expansions generally offer some of my favorite campaigns in the series. Napoleon offered that polish, that depth, and that landmass scale Empire just never could. And the fact that it had actual missions and events made it feel like a much more historical and personal game as well. Shogun 2 Fall of the Samurai gave us something we'd never had before. Based on Shogun 2's excellent foundations, it revolutionized the gameplay by adding gunpowder and modernized weaponry into the mix. And at the end of the day, Fall of the Samurai was a perfect expansion, but had no business whatsoever being a standalone. Rise of the Samurai, which was a smaller expansion, but still one which changed up the campaign map visuals, time period, and units, was an integrated part of Shogun 2. And then we have Attila, perhaps my favorite Total War game ever, but one which really should have been a Rome 2 expansion and brought all of its innovations and minor visual improvements into the Rome 2 base game. In the past, it might have seemed natural for CA to make these games independent of the base game in a purely financial sense. Making something a new title on its own does often allow for a higher sales price after all, but it's definitely not the best option for the consumer, and as has been shown, absolutely not in the best interest of the game. In an age where we know that visual upgrades of older titles are very possible, as has been shown and proven with PC titles like The Witcher 3, which completely revamped the game's visuals with a simple PC patch, and the same goes for many live service games out there. We've even seen modders themselves port or include various visual effects from later games into the previous ones, a feat CA should frankly be able to do themselves, and at no other cost than the price of the expansion alone. Because when the next major historical Total War title eventually comes along, I'd love nothing more than for the base game to be expanded up and down, for the visuals and performance to improve as time goes on, and for all of it to happen within one and the same game, regardless of the expansions. In this way, players could be certain that the foundational game they bought actually had a long-time future, and that in contrast to Empire, would not find itself superseded by a much more beautiful and polished title, yet one arguably lacking in substance and scope. Those were my thoughts on the standalone Total War games and my hopes for the structure of future Total War expansions. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, and as always, it would mean a lot if you consider supporting the channel on Patreon or as a YouTube member. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.